Hello and welcome to More Tea Minister. My name is Ian. Today we are doing the next video in our mini-series Cultivars in Disguise, where we're looking at the Jin Guan Yin cultivar, although it's not strictly speaking a cultivar because it's the result of grafting one tea onto another. And we've already looked at what that is and I don't want to mix it up. So what we're looking at today is taking that Jin Guan Yin and we are tweaking the formula slightly. So to do that, we're looking at Honey Fragrance Baozhong from Nanoshan. This is a well-packed 50-gram package, but it's well-packed full of tea. And what we have here is a tea that is still grown in China. It hasn't left its home territory, but it's the way it's being produced. It's being produced as a Baozhong. So that means lower oxidation and it's not a rolled oolong. Now I've done some reading and it's a higher oxidation than some Baozhongs. And spoiler, I've already looked at the leaves and they are darker to look at. However, it's still a Baozhong, it's a lower oxidation and it's got that processing standard or processing method. And it's a Taiwanese, therefore that makes it a Taiwanese style of tea, and it's been produced by a Taiwanese tea master. So you've got skill sets from one place being brought to another to take the tea, the raw material, if you want to put it that way, from one place, and then it's being treated with the experience and the sort of expectations, if you will, of somebody from elsewhere. So this is our tweak. This is us tweaking the formula and looking at Jin Guan Yin in a different guise. So let's take a look at the tea, and then we will have our Western brew of this tea, and then we'll have a Gongfu session as well. See you soon. Here we are looking at the leaves of the Honey Fragrance Baozhong from Nanoshan. It's an Oolong Baozhong, so that denotes low oxidation and the way that the leaves themselves are processed. It's a unusual Baozhong in that it's actually made from the Jin Guan Yin cultivar, which is the whole point of this mini-series. To look at, the leaves are uniform, I would say, in colour, almost predominantly that is. There are some browner parts and one or two sort of very pale, almost green parts here, but those are definitely outliers. The leaves themselves are about 1 inch long and 2 or 3 millimeters wide, and that looks to be quite consistent. Let's going to open the package again to take a sniff of the leaves. It's sweet and there's a bit of fruitiness in there. And an interesting, I don't want to say savoury, but maybe it's a sort of herbal, slightly vegetal note to it as well. And as always, the important thing is to see how this transfers over into the brewed tea. So we're going to take a look at the tea through a Western or Teapot style brew, and then we will have a Gongfu session as well. So let's move on to that. Hello and welcome to the next part of our video, where we are going to be reviewing the Honey Fragrance Baozhong, the Jin Guan Yin Baozhong, grown in China but processed into a Taiwanese Baozhong by a Taiwanese tea master. So the brewing parameters for this are a little unusual. I brought the temperature. This is based on the findings from the previous video, where even quite a high tea to water ratio and quite a high temperature wasn't really, I didn't feel it was doing the tea justice. We certainly got the full flavour profile, but it was dropping off in a way that made me think some parameter wasn't quite good enough for the tea. So to that end, this is pretty strong. This is 6 grams of tea per 300 mils. However, I have brought the temperature down to 90 because I was worried with it being a Baozhong and not a rolled oolong, we might be in danger of cooking it, and it's had 4 minutes. So 90 degrees, 4 minutes, 6 grams of tea, 300 mils. Now, the notes for the tea do point out that it's processed a little more than a really, really green Baozhong. So you can probably tell that by the colour. That's It's almost like a red tea, I would say. Let me see if I can get you some light on that. Yeah, there you go. The smell is very much not a red tea, though. Ooh, that's really sweet. No wonder it's called honey fragrance. Yeah, I can see why. It's not a straightforward, simple sugar. It's not monotone. It's got that kind of light and dark quality you'd expect from honey. And on top of that, it's got some body, and I wonder if on the taste you'll still have some of the creaminess in the background. Really looking forward to this. Bearing in mind this is going to be a little more intense than normal, simply because it's higher ratios, but hopefully that doesn't distort what the flavour profile is like. So let's give this a try. The honey is there on the cup, as opposed to just plain sweetness or simple sweetness. Mmm. Yeah, yeah, left with a mouthful of honey. That's lovely. There's no bitterness, so it hasn't been overcooked, but I'm not surprised it's only 90. Flavour's not dropping off. The honey's just still sitting right there. The honey's just there. If it wasn't for the total absence, part of my mind keeps saying, "Oh, it's going to turn into a dark tea. There's going to be some kind of dark fruits and something cocoa-y to tip it over into a black tea," but it doesn't do that. It's just masses of honey, and it's rich, but it's not cloying. The body is medium. It's not, and it certainly doesn't have any sort of thick mouth feel. Yeah, I would say that's really, really, really nice, and very different to the floral creamy oolongs from the previous video. So that's very distinctive. For my taste, at least, I think those parameters are spot on. Brew it for longer, bring the temperature down. You could probably have a similar effect 3 minutes if you had 95, but the amount of tea I think is spot on. That's really brought out the honey notes, and I've got a mouthful of honey, which is not a bad thing. So let's move on to our Gongfu session for this tea, and we'll see if that can separate out anything within these honey notes. So let's move on to that. Hello again, this is the final part of our video where we are going to have a Gongfu session to review this tea, which is the honey fragrance Baozhong. It's based on the Jin Guan Yin cultivar, although as we've said, it's not strictly speaking a cultivar. The grafted product, so to speak. And this is a slightly more oxidized version of a Baozhong, as we've seen from the colour and the taste. There's a really lovely honey taste that comes through on the Western brewing, the Western or Teapot brewing. I'm curious to see how well we can bring that out, whether it differentiates into anything. The water I've kept at 90. It seemed to respond pretty well to that as a Baozhong. Certainly the rolled Oolong versions needed much higher temperatures. If this seems a little thin, we could always try it up at 95, but it did seem to work okay. And it was full of honey. 4 grams of tea, by the way, 90 degrees centigrade, 50 mils per steeping. Everything is pre-warmed, and we will start looking at 25-30 seconds. Yeah, that's the leaves all covered. Sorry, that was a heck of a scrape. Terrible noise. Okay, let's see where we get with this. Coming up for 25 seconds. Let's take a look at 30. Ooh, that's pretty strong. We'll definitely take it no more than 35. There's a lot of sweetness there. Again, that complex sweetness from like something baked or honey. Yeah, it's really, really interesting. Okay, already the leaves are leathery, but I don't know if you can tell. They've soaked up some water, definitely. Having the light there was a good idea. Yeah, there's a little... It's not just sort of sweet leaves, as you often get. There's certainly something a little richer there. Colour-wise, I would say that's all gold already. That's pretty good. Yeah, it's sweet, but it's not just pure sweetness. There's something quite complex about that. I wouldn't be able to say whether it was honey or something baked, but it's certainly something along those lines. It's not sweeties. Same on the cup. Dropping off, a little thin, but honey, just honey already. Honey, and because it's honey, it's lingering on the palate. It's dropping off. The flavour doesn't last long on the tongue, but some aspects are sitting there. I'm swithering. Does that need a higher temperature? I'm worried that if we push the duration for too long, that honeyed, slightly bitter edge you get in honey, so that it's not just pure sweetness. I don't want that to take over, so we are going to up that a bit, just to be careful. Although this tea clearly reacts a lot better than the rolled oolong version. That was having none of it. Okay, so this is 95. Shorter steeping. We're going to start looking at 20. Because, not least because those leaves are covered. Okay, take a look at 20. Don't fidget, Ian. Hands to my sides. Okay, let's just go for 30 because there's definite honey there. Right, 30. Good strong colour. Yeah, honey. But again, it could be something, even a roasted root vegetable. They're very sweet, but it's complex. But that's what it is. It's not just pure monotonous sweetness. There's something that making it complex. Colour-wise, I would say that's darker still. Yeah, I think that's fair to say. It's complex. It's honey. It's the sweet and the slight edge to it. It's not. There's no fresh. There's no floral. There's no fruit. At least to my palate, it's just masses of honey. It's not even. At least that first steeping didn't even have much body. So I'd be curious to know whether the higher temperatures affected that. Oh yeah, really complex. Yeah, more body. Oh. Yeah. Yeah, the way you can sit there with I don't know, a wildflower honey, where it's just where there's lots of little things working in and out. That's what that's doing for the honey flavour. Wow. Okay, but it's light. I keep expecting something with that much sweetness to be kind of cloying or claggy. There's none of that. Oh. Yeah, great stuff. But again, you feel as if it wouldn't take much to push that too far. Or maybe it's just the honey edge, but we certainly haven't pushed it too far. We're being rewarded with lots of honey. The leaves are pretty much You can see the oxidized leaves. It's almost whole leaves that are oxidized. You can see that. There's still something of the honey note. The leaves are soft. Predominantly, there's some stuff that hasn't quite had a chance to soak up. But you wouldn't want to. I think that's as good as it's going to get in that respect. Yeah, okay. Let's a bit more water. Don't know why I'm leaning over to one side the way I am. Again, we will just give that maybe 30, 35 tops. Full stop. Because we're getting the honey, I'm just worried about pushing that edge too far, that slightly honey bitter edge too far. But it's it's really tasty. Okay. Right, this is, actually it's gone to 40, just overdid it. 40. There we go. Try not to incinerate myself. Now there's a touch more water there, so you might get something a bit thinner or less intense, just because I needed more water to cover the leaves. But the flip side to that is, the more water covering the leaf, the more flavour can get out. Honey with something else. Is that creaminess or is it just richness? I'm not sure. But there's certainly something else. Much darker colour. Oh yeah, much darker. What colour would I call that? A light brass. It's colour of brass. That's what it is. The honey notes there, it's lovely and sweet. Maybe a little less complex. There's no sort of dark edge to it. But that's not really a surprise, I suppose. We're going to let that cool a little. See if that helps. So yes, this Jin Guan Yin as a green oolong, very, very distinctive flavour profile in this Baozhong version. And it is called a Mixiang Baozhong, or honey fragrance Baozhong. But the notes, unless I'm much mistaken, didn't specify that it's bug bitten, which is what often the association of Mixiang isn't simply saying this is the flavour, the scent profile or the flavour profile. It's trying to point out that the honey fragrance has come from bug bitten leaves. I'm going to be looking at a whole series, a cultivar. It's not strictly a cultivar, but we're going to be looking at bug bitten leaves from Qingxin, from Shanlin Qi in various guises. Yeah, that's got slightly cooler, become very complex again. Nothing's dropping off. It's complex in a different way. It's, instead of having to deal with a whole load of different notes all at once, this time the honey, the sweetness is coming through that way. So there's one aspect, then another, then another, then another, then another. As a cereal, that's it. I seem to recall vaguely from school that you had parallel circuits, then serial circuits, or whatever they were called. So instead of the flavour all at once, you've got it serial one after the other. S-E-R-I-A-L, not cereal as in milk and cornflakes. The edge has come off, that bitter edge. But it's still complex. It's lost the bitter edge, so maybe that extra little bit of water helped. But not as intense either. So, what are we going to say about this tea? It's absolutely fantastic. I could just stop there. It's very interesting. I love the idea of taking something with one. This is the parameters you would expect, but a mouthful of honey every time I breathe in. And then some tweaking of how it's produced, not even where it's grown, just how it's produced and processed, I beg your pardon, turns it into something completely different. I love that. It's the first time I've seen this specifically, but I did buy this for this mini-series on cultivars in disguise. So it's not fair if I've had to do some digging, and by which I accidentally found that this honey fragrance Baozhong was Jin Guan Yin in the first place. It would be unfair to say, oh, well, it's hard to get hold of. That wasn't stopping me from putting this series together. The taste profile is very rewarding. I haven't had many bug-bitten teas or even Mi-Xiang, therefore honey fragrance teas. So I can't tell you whether this is standout or not, but it's extremely rewarding. You just need the higher temperature and with enough water to keep any honey bitter edges at bay. You're just steering a course. You're steering a course to get to that honey. The honey's right there. And if you want complex sweetener, honey all at once, the slight lower temperature, is that fair to say? No, more intense water, a little more water, but at that higher temperature anyway, brought out it allowed the honey flavour. You could pull out the different aspects of it in a row. Therefore, I would say, if you can, and that sounds interesting, give it a go. This came from Nano Ocean, and I would, as a matter of courtesy, recommend that you, I don't know why I'm cleaning up, that you should try to take it from there. I don't think you have much of a choice, but there's lots of bug-bitten teas elsewhere. I've really enjoyed this and I've learnt a lot. And if either of those two things applies to you, I am very glad. And highly recommended, hearty recommendation. And so, as always, happy steeping and God bless.